Elara Voss stood at the viewport of the Aegis, watching the purple haze of Carith IX's sunset. The sky glowed with soft light as the twin moons rose in silent arcs. She felt her chest tighten with a mix of pride and worry. The mission had been long, and every day brought new challenges. Yet tonight, she did not think of strategy or reports. She thought of Jace Marlowe, whose steady presence had become her constant in the unending dark of space. Jace paused in the corridor, datapad in hand. He had practiced what he would say, though he knew Elara would already know. The Aegis was quiet now, crew below deck, resting after the day's work. He saw her silhouette against the glass and felt a rush of warmth. He walked toward her, careful with each step, as if the ship itself held its breath. "Elara," he said softly. She turned, her auburn hair catching the last rays of light, smiled, but his eyes showed more than friendship. She raised a hand. In a slow gesture, no longer the crisp salute of a commander, but a simple invitation. "Just a hug," she said, voice soft but firm. The words seemed small, yet they carried weight. Jace nodded, setting aside his datapad. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Elara closed her eyes and leaned into him. For a moment, they stood like that, two figures framed by the galaxy's edge, sharing a quiet peace. The hum of the engines felt distant. Only the soft hiss of the life support and the stars beyond remained. Jace's heart pounded in his chest, but he held steady. He could feel Elara's steady breath, the way her shoulders rose and fell. He wanted to speak, to tell her what this meant, but he did not. He simply held her, letting her trust guide his actions. When they finally pulled apart, Elara's cheeks were faintly flushed. She looked at him with a gentle smile that made his breath catch. "Thank you," she whispered. The words were small, but Jace understood their full meaning. He offered her his hand, and she took it. They walked together to the small couch by the viewport. Jace sat first, and Elara settled close beside him. Their knees touched, and neither moved away. He glanced at the stars reflected in her eyes, feeling as if he fell deeper into the vast unknown. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from her cheek. Elara shivered, though not from cold. "I did not expect this," he admitted, voice low. "I thought we would talk about the mission." Elara shook her head gently. "I needed something more," she said. "I needed to know you were here. Not as my second in command, but as Jace." He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. Up slightly to meet her gaze. "I am here," he promised. "Always." Elara let a small laugh escape, a sound that warmed Jace more than any star. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He rested his, careful not to crush her helmet under his. "Wait." Outside, the moons climbed higher, casting pale light into the room. For the first time in many cycles, neither of them thought about orders, duties, or reports. They thought only of this moment. Elara lifted her head. "Promise me one more thing," she said. Jace looked at her, ready to agree to anything. "Promise me that when things get hard, we will remember this hug. We will remember what it felt like to trust each other completely." Jace nodded without hesitation. "I promise," he said. She closed her eyes again and held him close. Jace wrapped his arms around her, pulling her as near as he dared. The door to her quarters was nearby, but neither of them thought about it. They sat together in silence, sharing warmth against the endless cold of space. In that simple embrace, they found hope, a promise that no matter how dark the universe might become, they would face it side by side. Elara woke before dawn, the soft glow of emergency lights guiding her steps to the command console. She still felt the warmth of Jace's arms around her, as if the stars themselves had wrapped her in a gentle embrace. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling how safe she had felt. When she opened them again, she saw Jace standing by the door, waiting. His eyes held a question and a quiet hope. He offered her a fresh datapad. "Your morning reports?" he said, voice steady. Elara took it without breaking her gaze. She felt stronger knowing he was near. After she reviewed the figures, she tapped her finger. "Thank you," she replied. The words felt simple, but they meant much more. Jace nodded and slipped away. down the corridor, leaving Alara with her thoughts. On the bridge, crew members noticed Alara's calm confidence. She issued orders with clear, kind words. Every time she spoke, her mind drifted briefly to Jace's promise. He had said he would always be there. That promise gave her courage. When the tactical officer reported an approaching meteor shower, Alara gave firm guidance. Several crew glanced at Jace, who stood beside her. He met their eyes and gave a small, approving nod. His loyalty to Alara was plain for all to see. Later, during the ship's routine training exercise, Alara and Jace were paired to lead a team through the simulator. Scenario tested their decision-making under pressure. Red alarms flashed. Across the main screen, as simulated damage spread through the hull, Alara directed the team, calmly pointing out weak points. Jace supported her, offering options and backing her commands. When the simulation declared success, the team cheered. Alara looked at Jace, relief and pride shining in her eyes. He simply smiled, brushing a hand lightly against her arm. No words were needed, their partnership felt unbreakable. In the mess hall, lunchtime brought a brief respite. Alara sat at the head of the table, Jace at her side. They filled their trays with simple food protein cubes, steamed vegetables, and a cup of tea. As they ate, Jace told a quiet joke about the simulation earlier. Alara laughed, the sound echoing softly in the room. Around them, crew members smiled at the shift. In mood, the bond between commander and lieutenant was friendly, but new. Alara caught Jace's eye and winked. He laughed too, and for a moment the entire hall seemed lighter. That evening, Alara returned to her quarters and found Jace waiting once more. The door slid shut behind her with a soft hiss. She set down her datapad and turned to him. The room was dim, lit only by the starlight filtering through the viewport. Jace stepped forward, concern in his eyes. "Did today feel different?" he asked. Alara studied him before she answered. "Yes," she said simply. "I felt stronger." She crossed the small space between them and placed her hand on his chest. Jace's heart beat through his uniform. He met her gaze with steady calm. "You are not alone," he replied. Alara nodded. She reached up, resting her forehead against his. In that gentle contact, she felt his warm breath, heard his steady heartbeat. She closed her eyes, letting every worry slip away. Jace slid his arms around her, holding her close. The hush of space outside was like a promise. They would face every challenge together. They stayed like that for a long while. No ship alarms, no orders, no duties, only to people sharing a silent vow. At last, Alara whispered, "Thank you for reminding me what hope feels like." Jace kissed her forehead and said, "Always." In the soft glow of the Aegis's lights, they stood together, ready for whatever lay ahead. Alara entered the sensor bay just as the warning light blinked. The normally calm hum of the Aegis felt uneasy. Jace stood beside the central console, brow furrowed. "A minor glitch," he said, but the tension in his voice told her more. Alara stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Together, they studied the flickering readouts. Neither spoke, but in the shared silence, their trust grew stronger. Alara pointed at a loose cable, and Jace nodded. "Let's fix this," she said, and he offered her a tool. They knelt side by side on the grated floor. Sparks of concern shimmered. In the low light, Alara handed Jace a connector, and his fingers brushed hers for a moment. He caught his breath, then focused on the task. The cable clicked into place. Jace stood and extended his hand to help her up. Alara took it, her grip firm. The console stabilized, and the warning light went off. Both exhaled. Jace looked at Alara with relief in his eyes. "We make a good team," he said softly. Alara smiled. "More than a team," she replied, her voice steady. Jace hesitated, then spoke in a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough to stand by you when things go wrong." Lara's heart warmed. She reached out and touched his cheek. "You are," she said. "You stood by me when I doubted myself." He met her gaze, steady and open. In that moment, ship noises faded, leaving only their shared promise. They walked back to the bridge together. Crew members glanced up, noting the ease between commander and lieutenant. Lara took her seat at the center console while Jace went to his station. Orders flowed smoothly, and the Aegis moved through star lanes without effort. Each command Alara gave came with confidence fueled by Jace's support. When the course adjustments were complete, she looked to him, and he offered a quick, encouraging nod. Later, as the ship passed a field of glowing nebula gas, Alara invited Jace to the observation deck. The air shimmered with violet light. They stood in silence, watching colors drift and swirl. Jace reached for Alira's hand, and she wove her fingers through his. He leaned his head on her shoulder. "Thank you for trusting me," he said. Alara rested her head on his. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to trust," she answered. In the mess hall that evening, the crew shared stories of the sensor glitch. Laughter rang out as one technician joked about ghost cables. Alara and Jace sat side by side, sharing a simple meal of warm soup and bread. Their conversation was quiet, but full of meaning. A fellow officer raised an eyebrow as they exchanged playful smiles. The warmth between Alara and Jace was clear, but they spoke only of minor ship troubles and quiet hopes for a peaceful journey. When the lights dimmed for the night, Alara and Jace returned to her quarters. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. They stood close in the starlight. Jace reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Alara's ear. "I feel braver knowing you are by my side," he whispered. Lara wrapped her arms around him. "And I feel fearless knowing you believe in me," she replied. They held each other, their hearts beating in time with the ship's gentle pulse. Damned, in that embrace they found strength beyond any star's light. Alara sat at the navigation console, tracing the new course lines with careful attention. The Aegis drifted through quiet space, and Jace stood behind her, watching the stars slide past the viewport. He noticed how her brow furrowed when she weighed each decision. He reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. Lara looked back at him and offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for staying close," she said softly. Jace nodded. "Always," he replied. In that moment, the routine charting felt different. It felt like two people working side by side toward a shared dream. Lara tapped a sequence on the console, and the ship's path shifted, curving around. A pale blue planet below. That planet was their next stop for resupply. The crew prepared docking procedures while Alara and Jace reviewed the mission log. They spoke little, but every look carried meaning. When the log showed supplies were low, Alara leaned back and sighed. Jace placed the datapad on the table and fetched 2 cups of tea from the small galley. They sat at the metal table in Jace's quarters. The cups steamed between them. "I remember my first mission," Jace began, stirring his tea. "I was terrified." Alara listened, her eyes gentle. He told her about a distant station where he had felt alone. She reached across the table and covered his hand. "You are never alone now," she said. His tense shoulders relaxed. "Tell me more about you," Jace asked, lifting his cup. Lara took a sip and thought back to her homeworld. She described the rolling green fields of her childhood, the way sunlight danced on river water. Jace closed his eyes, imagining her story. When she finished, she looked at him. "What made you brave enough to stay?" she asked. Jace smiled shyly. "Knowing I could protect someone I care about," he answered. The Aegis shuddered as it moved into the planet's orbit. Outside, the blue world glowed with swirling clouds. From the porthole, they watched the sunrise spread across the horizon. Jace pointed to a bright spot of light on the planet's surface. "That will be our landing zone," he said. Alara reached for his hand. Together, they walked back to the bridge. On the bridge, the crew worked with quiet efficiency. Lara gave clear commands, and Jace supported every choice. As the ship descended through the atmosphere, gentle turbulence rattled the controls. Alara's steady voice guided the team. Jace's calm presence beside her made every instruction feel safe. When the Aegis settled on the landing pad, a soft cheer rose from the crew. Alara and Jace exchanged a hopeful glance. They left the bridge together and stepped onto the planet's surface. For the first time, is more than just commander and lieutenant. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Walked side by side, toward the supply cargo. Sunlight filtered through tall grasses, and Alara paused to touch a delicate bloom. Jace watched her, admiration shining in his eyes. She caught him looking and laughed. The sound was bright, in the open air. He took her hand, and she did not pull away. As the afternoon waned, the crew finished loading new provisions. Alara and Jace stood by the landing craft, talking quietly. She thanked him for his help, and he thanked her for trusting him with her heart. The sky above them turned soft pink, and the twin moons began to rise. Before boarding the Aegis, Alara turned to Jace. "No matter where we go next, remember this day," she said. Jace nodded and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. "I will," he promised. In that quiet moment, on a distant world, they both felt the power of simple trust and honest love. Hand in hand, they stepped back into the ship, ready to face whatever new horizons lay ahead. The air on the planet was colder than expected. Wind rushed through the narrow cliffs, carrying dust and echoes from the valley below. Alara tightened her jacket and looked around. The supply mission had turned into more than a simple landing. A minor ground tremor had damaged their shuttle systems. Forcing her and Jace to stay longer than planned, they stood together at the base of the rocky slope, examining the broken signal relay. "We'll need to wait for the tech team from Aegis," Jace said, scanning the comms. Alara nodded, brushing her hair back as the wind tugged at it. "Let's find shelter. The wind's picking up." They climbed up a narrow path and after a few minutes found a hollow between two high rocks. It offered just enough space to sit and block the breeze. Alara sat first, leaning her back against the warm stone. Jace dropped beside her with a sigh. Well, this wasn't on the mission. "Schedule," he joked. Alara gave a small smile, her eyes watching the sky darken above the cliffs. As night approached, the temperature dropped fast. Jace unpacked a small emergency blanket from his kit. "Here," he said, offering half to her. Alara looked at him for a moment before accepting. "Thanks," she said. Their shoulders pressed together beneath the thin layer. The cold didn't feel so sharp anymore. The stars began to appear above them, one by one. A soft silence grew between them. Dumber. Engine sounds. No alarms. Just the wind and the gentle rustle of night. "Do you ever wonder," Alara began, her voice quiet, "what life would have been like without the stars pulling us so far from home?" Jace looked at her. "Maybe, but I think we would have missed something important." Alara raised her eyebrows. "Like what?" she asked. "Like this," he said gently. "This moment with you." She looked away, her cheeks warming despite the cold. "I never meant to get this close to anyone," she admitted. "Being a commander means making space for duty, for responsibility." Ace nodded. "But even commanders need someone who understands." Alara turned back to him. "You understand more than anyone ever has." A gust of wind swept through the rocks, and she instinctively leaned closer. Jace didn't move, simply adjusted the blanket to wrap more tightly around them. "We're going to be fine," he said. "The ship will send help by morning." Alara nodded. She rested her head gently on his shoulder. "I know," she whispered. "But I'm not worried about the ship. I'm thinking about you. And me. In this strange, quiet night." Jace placed his hand on hers. "Then let's remember this. No mission, no orders. Just two people, finally saying what they feel." Alara closed her eyes and let the silence stretch. "When I asked for a hug that day," she said slowly, "I didn't know what I really needed. And now?" Jace asked, turning to her. "Now I know," she said, her voice steady. "I needed you." Jace's eyes softened, didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said it all. They sat like that for a long time, two hearts finding peace in the stillness of an alien world. The stars above them shone brighter than ever, as if the galaxy itself was watching with quiet approval. Eventually, Alara looked up and saw the signal light on the cliff blinking. "They found us," she said, almost regretfully. Stud stood and offered her his hand. She took it, rising to her feet, as they climbed down toward the landing team. Alara glanced back at the little hollow between the rocks. "We'll come back someday," she whispered. "Not as commander and lieutenant, just as U.S. Jace smiled and gently squeezed her hand. "I'd like that," he said. And together, they walked forward, toward the ship, toward their future, and toward something deeper than either had expected to find among the stars. The Aegis lifted off from the blue planet's surface just as dawn painted the sky in soft gold. Ilara stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the rising light fading into space. The crew moved around her, completing their tasks, but her thoughts were elsewhere, still in that quiet stone hollow where she and Jace had sat close. Hidden from the cold wind and the universe outside, Jace entered the bridge quietly and walked to his post. He didn't speak at first, but when Ilara turned toward him, their eyes met. No words were needed. That glance held everything: understanding, connection, something real that had grown between them like a flower in the darkness. "Course set for the next sector," Jace reported. Ilara nodded. Confirmed. Her voice was calm but warm. It wasn't just duty now, it was trust. And that trust gave her strength in a way no battle training ever had. Later that day, the crew gathered in the mess hall to celebrate a successful resupply. Plates of warm food lined the tables, and laughter echoed through the room. Ilara and Jace sat near the window, away from the center of the noise. They ate quietly, occasionally exchanging a look or a smile. "You've been quiet today," Jace said gently. Ilara sipped her tea and placed the cup down. "I've just been thinking," she said, "about how quickly everything has changed." "Change can be good," Jace said. "It can," she agreed. "If it's real?" Jace looked at her carefully. "This is real, Ilara. What we're building. It matters." She didn't speak for a moment, then she nodded. "I know, and I want to hold on to it." That night, the lights on the Aegis dimmed for sleep cycles. Ilara returned to her quarters and found herself standing near the door, uncertain. She wasn't alone for long. A soft knock came, and she opened the door to see Jace standing there, quiet smile on his face. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "I kept thinking about that night on the planet." "So did I," she whispered. He stepped inside. The door slid closed behind him with a soft sound. The room was quiet, filled with the glow of distant stars. Jace moved closer. "May I sit?" he asked. Ilara nodded. They sat together on the edge of her bunk, the silence between them filled with comfort, not distance. She looked down at her hands, then at him. "That night, when you held me, I felt safe. And I realized I want that feeling to last." Jace reached over and gently held her hand. "Me too," he said, "but only if you truly want it." "Because we're far from home, or because space is lonely?" "Only if your heart says yes." Lara looked up, her eyes shining in the dim light. "My heart has already said yes. I just didn't know how to listen before." He smiled and nodded. "Then let's take this slowly. No rushing, no confusion. Just two people learning how to care for each other." Ilara leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You always know what to say," she murmured. Jayoff chuckled. "Only with you." They stayed like that for a long while, listening to the soft hum of the ship, the heartbeat of their journey. No alarms, no orders, no decisions, just closeness. Built not from words, but from actions, from quiet honesty. As Ilara pulled the blanket around both of them, she whispered, "I thought I'd find something warmer than the stars out here." Jace looked at her, then gently kissed her forehead. "You did," he said softly. "And it's us." Wrapped in each other's arms, they let the silence of space cradle them. No matter what challenges tomorrow might bring, tonight was theirs. Quiet reminder that even among stars and endless missions, love could still find a way. The next morning, soft light filtered into Elara's quarters as the Aegis glided peacefully through deep space. The stars outside twinkled like quiet witnesses to the new chapter that had begun between her and Jace. She stirred beneath the blanket. Still wrapped in his warmth, her eyes opened slowly, and the first thing she saw was his calm, sleeping face beside her. For a long moment, she simply watched him, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. She gently shifted, careful not to wake him, and reached for her datapad. Duty always called, even after the most peaceful nights. But before she could, Stand. Jace's hand found hers. His eyes opened, soft and rested. Good morning, he said. His voice rough with sleep but filled with comfort. Ilara smiled. Good morning. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. For the first time in a long while, I didn't dream about missions or alarms. I just slept, and it felt right. Ilara nodded. It did. It feels like we finally found something solid, not just in space, but in each other. Jace looked at her with quiet pride. We've come a long way. Later that day, the crew assembled on the main deck for the weekly report briefing. Lara stood tall at the center of the bridge, delivering updates with her usual clarity. Her voice had a new ease, a softer strength. Jace watched her from his station, admiring how steady she had become, like a star that others could follow. After the briefing, Commander Rena from a nearby Allied vessel contacted them through the COM. The Aegis had been asked to assist in an upcoming diplomatic task transporting an ambassador through an unstable sector. It was a peaceful mission, but a delicate one. Lara agreed without hesitation. As she ended the transmission, she turned. To Jace, looks like we'll be escorting someone important. Jace raised an eyebrow. Ready for more long nights and tight schedules? She smirked. Only if you're beside me. You don't have to ask, he said with a smile. The next few days passed with quiet preparation. The ambassador arrived, a thoughtful elder from a distant world, calm and observant. He noticed the quiet bond between Ilara and Jace almost immediately. During a shared dinner, he spoke kindly to them both. You two move like planets in perfect orbit, he said, separate, but always aware of each other. Ilara glanced at Jace and laughed lightly. We've learned to trust. The ambassador nodded. That's rare. Hold on to it. The journey through the unstable sector proved smooth. Jace managed the ship's route with precision, and Ilara kept the crew focused and calm. When the ambassador was safely delivered, he gave them a gentle farewell. You've reminded me, he said, that in the vastness of space, the smallest connection can mean the most. After the ambassador left, the Aegis returned to its quiet path. That evening, Ilara and Jace met again in the observation bay. Stars shimmered across the glass dome as the ship sailed through the black sky. Ilara leaned against the railing, and Jace stood beside her, their shoulders touching. When I first asked you for a hug, she said softly, I never expected everything that came after. Jace turned to her, his voice low and sure. But you hoped. She nodded slowly. I did, and I still do. He took her hand gently. Then let's keep hoping. Let's keep walking forward, one step at a time. She looked up at him. Together, he smiled. Always. They stood there in silence, letting the stars surround them. There was no need for more words. In the stillness of space, their hearts had found a home. A place not written in maps or charts, but built in quiet moments, shared dreams, and the warmth of being understood. Together. They turned from the window and walked back down the corridor, not just as commander and lieutenant, but as two souls. Who had discovered something more beautiful than any mission? Love in the heart of the galaxy.